Welcome to Love and Lattes, the podcast designed for women who are ready to stop settling and start living a life full of authentic love, confidence, and real connection. I'm your host, Victoria, the self-love scientist, speaker, and coach, and I'm here to help you reclaim your power, deepen your relationships, and fall unapologetically in love with yourself. So grab your tea, your latte, or your favorite beverage, and let's get started.
Did you know the pressures for fertility can shift the dynamics for intimacy? Have you ever felt like your hormones are running the show, your energy, your mood, your aesthetics, and even the confidence? And no one really taught us how we can actually work with them. What if understanding your hormones wasn't actually all that scary, all that bad, but actually empowering? And we can use that in our most intimate relationships. Well, my loves, today in Love and Lattes, I am joined by Dr. Ami, a licensed clinical pharmacist who specializes in women's hormonal health, PCOS, and preventative care. Through her own PCOS journey and professional expertise, she's passionate about helping women understand their hormones as the foundation for a limitless life. Welcome, Dr. Ami.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited about our
Absolutely.
conversation today.
Me too. So kind of to wrap in a lot of things, because I know I said a chunk of information, but just for people to be aware, why is taking control of our hormonal health important?
Our hormones affect everything. It's like the basis of um, our health, our energy levels, our mood, how we interact with other people, our relationships, how productive we are at school, at work. Like literally, our hormones impact everything. And so that's why I truly believe it's the foundation. Like once we feel our best, we can thrive and do anything and everything that we want.
I feel like it's so easy for us, and this is also just something I've noticed where we kind of grow up in a way where it's like, you can work out and that creates the aesthetics and pleasing feelings. You can put on the face creams and the lotions, you can eat the foods, but we still may not be doing enough, especially for the things that are happening at a cellular level.
Yes, definitely, because it's a little bit more than that. Well, first, our food isn't really the best. Like, we have to be really conscious of the foods we're eating. There's a lot of foods that are labeled as high protein, but then if you look at like the ingredients, like the second ingredient is sugar, it has added sugars in it. So we
Mhm.
really have to be aware of those things because that can worsen or contribute to things like insulin resistance, which is a hormone which can impact our hormone levels, not just with like PCOS, but even down the road in perimenopause. And then, a lot of times if we're eating well as we think we are, or we're working out like 1 to 2 hours a day, but we're only sleeping like 5 or 6 hours, then that is not going to be the best either. So it's definitely about important to find the balance between eating well, exercising, but also managing our stress levels and sleep and mindset.
I'm really glad you brought up the sleep part because you're absolutely right. I know every once in a while it'll happen where I'll get maybe sounds funny when I say it, less than 7 hours. But
Yeah.
I have felt the difference in my systems the next day where I'm like, I went to bed late and now everything is off.
I totally, yup, hear you. We're so good at, as humans, as adapting. So sometimes we can function, for a little bit of time and we think that everything's okay. But then it's like when you do get that good night's sleep, you're like, oh, wait, but I actually feel a lot better. Like there's like good enough, but then there's like, phenomenal.
So from a scientific perspective, and this is just my curiosity brain, and then we're going to get into the intimacy part. But what do you know what it is about the hormones that generally do create, like, how is it that the hormones are a part of like how we feel and like what's really going on there? And yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, so if we just start talking about insulin, that's a hormone. So We eat different foods, our pancreas releases insulin in the body to digest the food. But over time, if we have too much insulin in the body, then it causes something called insulin resistance. And those fluctuations can lead to things like low blood sugar levels and feeling really, really hungry. And so sometimes when we get like hangry, that is affected. If we don't sleep well, we actually worsen insulin resistance. And then that can lead to, over time, other health problems like sleep apnea, for example,
Mm.
PCOS, diabetes, and even, like I mentioned earlier, even if someone doesn't have things like PCOS or insulin resistance right now, it still can impact you during perimenopause, which we all as women will go through eventually. And then even different things like cortisol, high cortisol levels. When our cortisol, so naturally in our body, we make cortisol in the morning to help us wake up. And then at night, we produce melatonin, which combats the cortisol. So cortisol goes down, melatonin goes up. So that helps us sleep well. But if we end up like staying up late or are stressed in the middle, like later in the evenings, then, our cortisol level is higher. And so then that impacts our ability to get restful sleep, which then contributes to a day where, we have low energy levels, our mood is off, maybe we make more poor decisions on foods we eat, we don't have energy to work out. And so it's all like a ripple effect. And then our hormones together, they work like a symphony. So over time, if one hormone is off balance, then it starts impacting other things. So like we talked about insulin and cortisol, if they remain elevated for a long period of time, cortisol is actually breaks down into sugar, which then worsens insulin resistance, then
Oh, wow.
starts impacting our other hormones like progesterone and estrogen. And those hormones are really important for helping us maintain like a regular menstrual cycle as well.
That's actually very interesting. I didn't know that they actually, in some ways, weaved together. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Speaking of like how they weave together in cycles, I want us to kind of flow into, how does the hormones affect our intimacy? What's going on there? And
Oh,
why should we prioritize that, especially for intimacy sakes or even fertility sakes?
yeah. So we have four different cycles. I mean, four different phases in our menstrual cycle, which many women may not know. But the first one is like the menstrual phase, which most of us most commonly know, and that's when we get our period. And so during that time, our hormone levels are low, but then over time they start to rise. So then the next phase is the follicular phase. So this is when our ovary releases the egg in preparation for either pregnancy or to kind of go through that cycle again. And then we enter the third phase, which is ovulation. So this is one that is also most commonly known after menstrual cycle. I mean, menstrual phase. So during ovulation, this is actually when our body is like releases the egg that has developed from the follicular phase. And during that time is when things like our sex drive goes up because that's the time we are the most fertile. And so this is important because for intimacy, you might feel more naturally like wanting to engage in intimacy. And then after that, after ovulation is when our progesterone levels naturally go up. And progesterone is really important, which before we get pregnant, it's important because there's a lot of health benefits for like our mood, bone health, muscle health, things like that. But when we get pregnant, progesterone is the hormone that's really important with maintaining the pregnancy as well. And then after the third phase is the luteal phase. And so this is when the estrogen and progesterone starts to taper off and gets ready either for implantation if the sperm and the egg did meet, or to shed the uterine lining again and repeat the cycle. So when it comes to intimacy and fertility, all the hormones have their role, but like most importantly, ovulation and progesterone are really important. And then it's really important to be aware because, there might be times like right before your period where you're like not in the mood to be intimate, and that's actually just how you may feel naturally with where you are in your cycle. So it's important to be aware because sometimes we think like, oh, I mean, we are very different than men. Men's cycles fluctuate every 24 hours, where their testosterone goes up like first thing in the morning and then drops down in the evening. That's why like 9 to 5 jobs work really well for them,
Mhm.
with their productivity levels. Whereas for us women, we are more on like the moon cycle, the 28-ish days. The moon cycle is about 28 to 29 days. And so we are more like on the moon cycle. And so it's really important to know this because this is why we may have, different levels of desire for intimacy, or even just in general, like energy levels of how much we want to engage with people in general or not.
No, I think that's really important. And I do feel, even personally, the more attuned and my own version of tracking has helped me plan, aside from my social life, but also like professionally. I'm like, okay, at this point, I have a lot of creativity. I'm going to try and do as much as I can, have all the phone calls here. But once I start hitting luteal, I feel like even in the second week, as like it's coming into the menstrual, I'm like, I have to pull back because I'm not feeling as, hyper. I'm not feeling as social. I'm starting to get moody. But even, I'm so glad you said that though, because I do think it's, you know, I feel that we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves, like, oh, I'm not in the mood, or I'm just not feeling very good about myself. What are your thoughts on that, when these different hormones are coming at different stages of the cycle, and how that impacts our confidence?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it comes from maybe confusion, right? Where it's like, I think it comes from like expectations that we're expected to always be on or always be giving 110%, like 24/7, 365. Like that's impossible, right? And it's like the expectation is put onto us either by ourselves or, other people outside of us. And so then there's that pressure of like, well, I don't want to disappoint. And um, I think it's important to understand our cycle and naturally how our body works, being connected with it so that you can respect what you need at that time and support your body instead of pushing through. Because the more that we fight our body, we feel very disconnected, and disappointed, or we think like our body is failing us. But
Mm,
really, it's the things that come up. It's like our body is giving us a sign that, hey, something's wrong. Like things like rashes, like just any or hair loss, things like that. Those are signs your body is giving you that something is wrong. So I think it's important to like pay attention, respect your body, support your body, and then over time, once you become more like understanding of your body, and I think that also impacts your confidence because you feel very confused. If you're not confident, you're confused about what's going on with you, with your
mhm.
health, and the ripple effect that has like in all the areas of your life. So I think the confidence part comes from and really having that knowledge. Like knowledge is power. Once you have that knowledge of your own body, the right things you can do to support yourself, I think that makes you feel good about yourself, and then that eludes that confidence.
Oh no, I think you're right. I mean, you are right. Yes, ma'am. Because it is. I do feel that we can, like, once we start creating this, like a routine, right? Like you create this discipline of like, I'm going to go to bed at this time, I'm getting up at this time, to create that inner regulation. And then you're becoming more conscious of like what you're putting inside your body. How, like, did I, like, earlier today, I went on a little, like, I call it my little bitty walk, like a wee walk. It's just a few steps, but it's better for me to try now, and then I'll go back on another one later. But I know it can be very important to get that movement in. Um, and then when it comes to creating, let's see, where was I going with that? I was like, my whole train went, whoa, whoa. But yeah, I do think, let's just say, it is important to create that confidence, and understanding that, how I feel today will, it's possible it'll be changing tomorrow, and where I'm at in my cycle is also very important too. How can we take that ownership of knowing where we are in our cycle, creating these healthy habits, and um, bettering our chances for fertility in the future if that is something we want.
Yeah, and the key you said is if that's something we want, and even if we don't want that, we have been mistaught that, well, if you don't want to ever have kids, then you don't have to worry about your period and you can just take birth control and just like suppress it. But really, whether we want kids or not, it's still important to have regular cycles, to have healthy cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Our cycles are actually another sign, a report card of our health. So if there's a reason that you're having like super painful periods, cramps where you can't function, then that's a sign you might have too much estrogen, a little bit of a hormone imbalance there. If you have like so much PMS or PMDD, which is a little bit more of a severe version of PMS, that's impacting your relationships. So some signs and symptoms of PMDD are things like feeling like depressed, crying, uncontrollably, having suicidal thoughts, having like outbursts of anger and things that you may take out on other people or you just can't function, then that is not okay. And that's something, someone, if they're listening, if you feel like, hey, that's you, then you can reach out for support from me or another healthcare professional. But things like that need to be addressed. We may get taught that, like, you just have to push through it, just be strong.
Mm-hmm.
But really, no. Like, that is your body telling you that something is wrong and you need
Yeah.
to take care of it. And whether you want kids or not, like having those balanced hormones, having healthy cycles where it doesn't impact your day-to-day life, where you can still function is really important because it's important for our long-term health. Like I was just mentioning, like our well, it prevents cancer and it improves our sex drive, our digestive system, our energy levels, our bone health, our muscle health. Just we really need to have balanced hormones for those things, whether we want kids or not. But if we
Yeah.
are more fertility focused, then it's super important to get that addressed and under control and know what your cycles are doing at least 6 months to a year in advance. Because that way you'll understand, like, hey, this is when I'm ovulating, so I can time intercourse appropriately to get pregnant. And it's also important if you don't want to get pregnant to know that
Mm.
window as well to prevent pregnancy. And yes, and then to also have a healthy pregnancy and maintain that pregnancy to term. So there's so much that goes into just preparation for pregnancy as well.
And you said something earlier, and I want to kind of wrap up our conversation here with this question. I feel like in this day and age, we're constantly just fed all this information.
Oh
And
yeah.
for someone who is listening or starting out in their journey, they're like, I really do feel like I need some help in trying to like get control, to create that confidence, to understand my body so that I can have this balanced, as we said in the beginning, like a limitless lifestyle. So, what would be your recommendation? Because I feel like nowadays anyone can be considered an expert or a specialist, and there's so much, like, there's a lot of product out there. And my fear is that people, whether it's an influencer or, it might work for this person, but not this person, like, how can we trust who we talk to and the resources that we see? What would be your recommendation for our listeners?
That's a good question. So, first thing, I would look at the person's credentials and experience, like where are they getting this information from? And then I would also look at claims that people are making. Sometimes if it feels like too good to be true, then it probably is. A lot of products guarantee things, like there's products that guarantee pregnancies and stuff like that. And I'm like, you can't guarantee that. Like there's so much to it than just this one product.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would say, just be mindful of those types of things. And honestly, like our health and our hormones are really individualized. And that's why like I personally offer like one-to-ones as like my primary form of working with me because everyone is so individualized. Like things that work for one person may not work for someone else. So yeah, I would say, be mindful of those things and looking at the person's credentials and experience. And then in terms of like, I think I forgot to mention from your last question also is like ways that we can understand our hormones a bit better. There's a couple of apps I personally like and use myself, like Lively. They are very good about like helping you understand the different phases of your cycle and different things you can eat or do workout wise to support yourself during those phases. And Stardust is another great app if you like wanting to, if you're into astrology and also like want to have the menstrual cycle portion of it. Those are a couple of good apps I recommend. And so you can track your information on there and just start understanding a little bit more and more about your menstrual wellness.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you, Dr. Ami, for sharing your expertise on how we can take better, like a better approach, really, and control. And like when I say control, it just sounds bland. So I'm not trying to say that, but I feel like when we get a better idea of what's happening on the inside for us, we can create a more fulfilling lifestyle, and that feeds into our relationships. So,
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's about control in a good way because we
yeah.
can't sometimes if feel like a victim, we blame other people that, hey, like, well, my doctor told me this is the issue, or they told me that. But now, like, it's a negative thing that we have a lot of resources at our fingertips, but it's also a positive thing that we have a lot of resources at our fingertips because you can be your own advocate. Only you can take care of yourself. Only you are responsible for your own health. If someone's not listening to you, find a different provider. There's so many providers out there now. So you have to take control of your own health because if you don't, nobody else will.
Mm. Yes, that is an amazing way to close out our conversation. You are literally your number one provider. Well, thank you so much, Ami, for being on Love and Lattes today. And thank you, listeners. We definitely dropped a lot of great information. This is definitely something that we don't see in schools, and we're probably not having that conversation between friends and family. So definitely go back, replay a couple things, and start empowering yourself with your hormones. And we'll see you in the next episode.